David, how many pull-ups can you do?
Martha, do I look like a gym bunny?
Okay. I'm not sure where that leaves you in the Trump administration, because I don't know whether you saw the video of RFK Jr. and the Transport Secretary, Sean Duffy. They were doing a pull-up competition at the airport, of all places. And it's part of this sort of strategy to try and bring healthy eating outlets and mini gyms to the airport. And RFK Jr. is claiming that he did 20 pull-ups. And it is a little bit rich coming from me, someone who can do 0 pull-ups. But he's not doing the pull-ups properly, because you've got to get your chin, I'm told by the gym bunnies, over the pull-up bar. And RFK Jr. doesn't do that. So I'm disagreeing with his claim about 20 pull-ups. But I think he can do a few more pull-ups than anyone in the Trump 100 studio.
Well, Martha, I don't do pull-ups in the airport, but I have met prominent figures from Trump's inner circle in the swimming pool in my apartment building, because Washington is not a big town. In fact, I introduced myself to one of them and the reply was, no politics in the pool.
Amazing.
I'm David Blevins in the Trump 100 studio in Washington, D.C.
And I'm Martha Kellner in Los Angeles.
President Trump is back on the stump for the first time in months. The polls say Americans are unhappy with his handling of the economy. Can he reverse the tide?
But before that, the president has been sitting down for a blockbuster interview with Politico. In it, he eviscerates Europe and European leaders. David, on the podcast yesterday, we were discussing how the White House over the weekend released this national security strategy, which rakes Europe and European politics over the coals. And a lot of people dismiss that document as being devised by policy wonks and not politicians. It seems, though, that at least one politician has had a hand in it, because a lot of what was written in that 33-page document was being echoed by Donald Trump himself. He sat down, as I said, with Dasha Burns of Politico, and he called European nations weak and decaying. He was not pulling any punches.
I know the good leaders, I know the bad leaders, I know the smart ones, I know the stupid ones. You got some real stupid ones too. But they're not doing a good job. Europe is not doing a good job in many ways. They're not doing a good job.
I want to ask
They
you
talk
about
too
that.
much, and they're not producing. We're talking about Ukraine. They talk, but they don't produce. And the war just keeps going on and on.
Straight from the horse's mouth, you might say. Yes, Politico is an American online news site. It is very interesting, Martha, that he sat down with them at all. In the last few months, he has described it as a left-wing rag, as a radical left magazine, and as the home of fake news, a term we hear a lot. But Politico on Tuesday awarded him the title of the most influential man in Europe. And so he duly sat down with them.
They know what they're doing.
But this was a 45-minute interview. It was very wide-ranging. And to say it was explosive, I think, would be an understatement. The president began by arguing that he had taken back control of the country where the Democrats had lost it. But it did, as you say, very quickly evolve into a broadside of all broadsides on Europe and on his European counterparts.
I can't remember a time, David, when a US president has been so scathing about European leaders. Naturally, there are going to be disagreements, differing points of view, varying national interests. Remember George W. Bush and the French president Jacques Chirac, they vehemently disagreed over the Iraq war. But that doesn't really compare to what's going on here, what Donald Trump is now saying, taking his comments alongside the national security strategy document, which warned Europe would be facing civilizational erasure if it continued down the path it's currently on. And, in this interview with Politico, he doubled down on what's written there.
I think they're weak, but I also think that they want to be so politically correct. I think they don't know what to do. Europe doesn't know what to do. They don't know what to do on trade either. I mean, I look at a lot of the trade, situation that's going on over there. It's a little bit dangerous, but Europe, they want to be politically correct, and it makes them weak. That's what makes them weak.
It's really striking when you hear those words coming from a president of the United States. But I think we have to be honest that the optics have been there for a long time. As you and Mark talked about yesterday, all you've got to do is think back to the Vice President, J.D. Vance's criticism of Europe at the Munich Security Conference. To the "you don't have the cards" moment with Zelensky in the Oval Office, and even to the number of times European leaders have sought to appease Donald Trump over the course of the last 10.5 months. The NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte even calling him daddy. For months now, it felt like that placation and appeasement might work, that the president might stay on the side of the Europeans. At times, we've heard his stance on Ukraine appearing to soften, but not anymore. In this interview, we really learned what he thinks, that Russia is winning the war in Ukraine and that it's Europe's fault, not Putin's fault, that the war is still going on.
We mentioned yesterday as well how much Moscow loved that national security document. Make no mistake, they're going to be loving this too. You know, Putin should be an international pariah, but Donald Trump is continuing to bring him in from the cold. And he casts this invasion of a sovereign nation in Ukraine as kind of a competition. And he says, you know, Ukraine's losing, Russia's winning, as though it is that simple.
And we've already had some really strong responses from European leaders. Friedrich Merz, the German Chancellor, said that Trump's current rhetoric is unacceptable. He says he saw no need for America to want to save democracy in Europe and that if it was necessary to save it, Europe would manage that themselves.
Manches darin ist nachvollziehbar, manches darin ist verständlich, manches darin ist für uns aus der europäischen Sicht inakzeptabel. Dass die Amerikaner nun die Demokratie in Europa retten wollen, dafür sehe ich keine Notwendigkeit. Das, wenn sie zu retten wäre, das würden wir schon alleine hinbekommen. Ich sage in meinen Gesprächen mit den Amerikanern, America first is fine, aber America alone kann nicht in eurem Interesse sein. Ihr braucht auf der Welt auch Partner. Und einer der Partner kann Europa sein. Und wenn ihr mit Europa nichts anfangen könnt, dann macht wenigstens Deutschland zu eurem Partner.
And the Irish Prime Minister, Taoiseach Micheál Martin, rejected the idea that Europe is, as Trump has characterised it, weak.
But I also would disagree with President Trump's description of Europe as weak. Obviously, it depends on how one defines strength.
Yeah, it's not just these European leaders who have been pushing back on Trump and his language over the past few days. The Pope Leo XIV, he's also got involved.
Yeah. Very unusual for the head of the Catholic Church to speak so candidly about political matters. The Pope met Volodymyr Zelensky on Tuesday morning at the Papal Palace of Castel Gandolfo. And Zelensky talked about Ukraine's deep appreciation for the Vatican's humanitarian efforts in Ukraine. But then a little later, reporters asked Pope Leo what he made of the president's comments about Europe.
What do you think about Trump's peace plan for Ukraine? Do you think it's fair?
I'd rather not comment on that. I haven't read the whole thing. I think, unfortunately, some of parts of it that I have seen make a huge change in what was for many, many years a true alliance between Europe and the United States. The remarks that are made about Europe, also in interviews recently, I think are trying to break apart what I think needs to be a very important alliance today and in the future.
And always striking, I think, that it is the first American Pope who is expressing such strong opinions about an American president.
The Pope going about as strong as a Pope can go there. It is a fascinating moment, though, isn't it, for the future of Europe, of European stability, and what happens next to this relationship with America? Will they try and break away and go it alone, or do they simply need Trump and the US too much to break away?
So, Martha, it's Trump on the stump again. We've spent the past few days talking about the president's foreign policy. And we know he spent a fair bit of time on the road, visiting 15 countries across 8 different trips during his first year as president, attempting to carve out this role as peacemaker in chief, all part of his campaign to win the Nobel Peace Prize in due course. But it seems his team has recognised the need to get back out talking to the American people. It's the domestic policy issues that have been drowned out by the foreign policy noise.
Yeah, now he seems to be shifting a gear in this campaign speech. He's shining a spotlight on the economy. And ironically, like Biden before him, Donald Trump believes there's a perception problem around the economy. So he thinks that people actually think it's worse than it is. And harking back to that Politico interview, he's asked how he would assess how the economy is, the health of the economy at the moment, and he grades it, listen to this, an A++++++. That's 5 pluses.
That's quite an end of term report, isn't it, Martha?
It's not bad. Anyway, so he's gone with his school report to the key swing state of Pennsylvania. He's going specifically to a place called Mount Pocono, which is in eastern Pennsylvania. Interestingly, it's only the 5th time that President Trump has done one of these campaign-style speeches in his second term. By contrast, back in 2017, his first year in office of his first term, he'd done 10 of those speeches. So it does seem that he's been preoccupied with this turnstile of foreign leaders in the Oval Office. And now he's, changing focus slightly to domestic issues.
Yeah, and guess what he's talking about? The speech in Pennsylvania is another opportunity for him to hammer home his affordability message, which has been the hallmark of his presidency really in recent days. It's why he's heading back to this battleground state. It mattered so much in last year's election. It's going to matter again in next year's midterms. And we know that last year the difficulties of the cost of living swung the vote in his favour and won him the keys to the White House.
Yeah, there's always been this relentless focus by the Trump administration on gas prices. I've been following Caroline Levitt, the press secretary, on social media the last few days, and she's reposting people saying, that their gas prices are dropping, that they're going below $250 per gallon. And I think that's something that they're trying to own in on, egg prices coming down, gas prices coming down. I'm just not quite sure how much more mileage battering President Biden for the economy, which he left behind, it is going to have. I think people, even Donald Trump supporters, are eventually going to say, you can't keep blaming the man that went before. The venue they've chosen for this campaign speech, picked very deliberately though, Monroe County, which is where Mount Pocono is, that gave Donald Trump a very slim victory in 2024. He won with less than a percentage point there, separating him and Kamala Harris. And I think we're also seeing this move into focusing, like you say, on the midterm elections. Susie Wiles, who is the president's chief of staff, she did an interview on Monday in which she talked about how this Pennsylvania rally is the start of the administration putting the president front and centre of that push towards the midterm elections.
He's going to have a fun next year, but we're going to put him on the campaign trail too. Typically, just a little bit of campaign speak, if I may.
Yeah.
Typically, in the midterms, it's not about who's sitting at the White House. It's you localize the election.
Right.
And you keep the federal officials out of it. We're actually going to turn that on its head.
Good.
And put him on the ballot, because so many of those low propensity voters are Trump voters.
Yes, they are.
And we saw a week ago Tuesday what happens when he's not on the ballot and not active. So I haven't quite broken it to him yet, but he's going to campaign like it's 2024 again.
Oh.
I think it's fair to say that Republicans are worried at the moment that these midterm elections in November next year, where all of the House of Representatives and 1/3 of the Senate are up for re-election, they could see negative results for the party, which would hinder, obviously, Donald Trump's ability to enforce his agenda in his last 2 years in office.
And it's an interesting choice of venue in Pennsylvania, a casino. So a headline writer's dream.
For a gamble.
Absolutely. Donald Trump rolls the dice. Donald Trump reveals his hand. And I think he has certainly rolled out some of his classic lines. With Trump, you can almost guess what he's going to say next. It's a sort of Trump bingo. A year ago, we were a dead country, now we're the hottest country on earth, I've ended 8 wars, etc., etc.
Yeah.
Incidentally, it's very cold in Mount Pocono today, lows of minus 13 degrees Celsius. That's 9 degrees Fahrenheit. I wouldn't want to be a 79-year-old president on the stump there, even though the speech was indoors.
But that's our message. They gave you high prices. They gave you the highest inflation in history, and we're bringing those prices down rapidly. Lower prices, bigger paychecks. You're getting lower prices, bigger paychecks. We're getting inflation. We're crushing it. And you're getting much higher wages. I mean, the only thing that's really going up big, it's called the stock market and your 401ks. That's going up.
The irony is clear, though. Just blaming others and insisting it's going to get better, it won't be enough for Donald Trump. To some extent, that is what Joe Biden did. He blamed COVID, then he blamed the war in Ukraine, and then he even adopted the term Bidenomics. None of that cut through to the American people. And who capitalised upon it? Donald Trump. So now he's telling everyone who's listening that the challenges are Biden's fault and that America is much more affordable than it was a year ago. But the approval ratings and public sentiment show that people are still feeling the pinch. And we all know when it comes to elections, that's where it matters. Fox News, Gallup, NBC News, The Washington Post, all of them have Trump's approval rating somewhere between 36% and 43%, with more than 60% of people disapproving of his handling of the economy. That is worrying reading for the White House. And it chimes with just a third of people saying that Trump's economy has lived up to their expectations. So lots of work for them to do if the president's going to win over the American people between now and the midterm elections.
The few dozen people standing behind him holding posters with the words lower prices, bigger paychecks printed on them. It's another indication that the president and his team know that the future of his presidency, the ability for him to implement his plans, rests on getting, this economy in order and convincing Americans that they're going to have more money in their pockets.
So, Martha, last week, lots of razzmatazz around the president's FIFA Peace Prize. But could his moment in the spotlight on the world football stage be under jeopardy?
Well, FIFA, which is the world football governing body, they could certainly be in trouble over that. As a reminder, that Peace Prize was given to Donald Trump just last week at the 2026 World Cup draw, which happened in Washington, D.C. It was presented to him by the FIFA president, Gianni Infantino. Well, now a formal complaint has been submitted to FIFA saying that Infantino broke the rules by doing so.
Yeah, the complaints come from a non-profit organisation, and they say the Peace Prize, as well as other actions during the draw, contravened FIFA's strict politically neutral policy.
Yeah, Infantino's very much made it his business to sidle up to Donald Trump over the past year. He seems to be in total lockstep with the president. So we'll obviously keep an eye on what happens with that complaint and whether FIFA takes their own politics policy seriously.
Prize-winning analysis from you, Martha. It'll be interesting to see how Trump and Infantino engage when they actually step onto the world stage again for the event next summer.
Yeah, it certainly will. David, thank you as ever. We're going to be back on Friday. For now, please do write in any questions or comments to trump100@sky.uk.
Bye-bye for now.
See you then.